Hi everyone, my name is Daisy and today I'm really excited to have Jerry from Nomad Elite again here with me. Hi Jerry, how are you?
Hey Daisy, I'm good, thank you. How about yourself?
That's great. I'm great too. So I'm really excited for us to do yet another interview together. And today we're going to be talking about Asia. So without further ado, let's start with the questions. And first, I would like to ask you, can you give us an update? What's been going on in Asia lately?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's talk about Southeast Asia, which is the place that I used to call home for many years. You know, you and I, Daisy, we have talked about it so many times. I have told you my stories and, you know, how great of a time I had in Asia before this whole pandemic started. And, you know, I did leave already a year before the pandemic started, but I was looking to get back. But given the current circumstances, it does not sound like a good deal to me because I don't want to be restricted, and I want to talk about this right now. So what's going on in Asia is definitely not what anyone anticipated to even be possible 2 years from now. Things have changed, governments have changed. The approaches that are being taken in Asia are everything but comfortable for foreigners living there. I have friends that are still in Vietnam. Some of them already left, some are still there. And they had a pretty insane lockdown. They had a 3-month lockdown in Vietnam where pretty much nobody was allowed to go outside the house, not even to buy food. So you were only allowed to buy food before the lockdown started. But as soon as the lockdown began, you were not allowed to go out anymore. And the only thing that was available in terms of food was food delivery. So many people almost starved to death. And I'm sure some people starved to death, but it was just a horrible time. And Vietnam is just one example, right? In the Philippines too, I mean, take a look. They had endless lockdowns there and no clear path of reopening. And they're still unclear when the borders will reopen to international tourists. With that being said, you know, taking just a look at these two countries, I mean, it has been everything but convenient for foreigners and locals living there. And I know I've been doing a lot of travel updates on Asia, you know, talking from a more positive perspective, because I do believe things will open up on that side of the world. However, it seems to be that if and when things open back up, you are required to be vaccinated, you know, get tests done prior to boarding the plane, also up on arrival. So there's really no chance that you will get into Asia in the near future without complying with all the entry requirements. And you know, entrepreneurs, digital nomads, they don't like being told what to do. Because if you're listening to this video right now and you lived in Asia before the pandemic started and you know the old Asia, what it was like, what it felt like, you know, the freedom you had, the quality of life, the affordability, I mean, all these components, they were so attractive to us. But the Asia that you see when you go back now and you just talk to people that have lived in Asia during the pandemic, they'll tell you everything that happened really is completely different to what you were used to back then. I do think things will normalize eventually, but only to the ones willing to comply to the standards, you know, the new standards that the government requires. And if you're unwilling to do that, you really have to ask yourself, is Asia, and especially Southeast Asia, still the right destination for me? Personally, I think that traveling within Southeast Asia will be extremely difficult over the next 3 to 5 years. Considering, you know, there could be a new lockdown, you know, they could close the borders at any given moment, regardless of how positive reopening looks right now. If, for instance, there should be another COVID outbreak in Vietnam, Malaysia could say, hey, you know what, Vietnam has too many COVID cases, too many deaths, you know, we're not gonna allow people, travelers, doesn't mean foreigners, locals, you know, whoever, they won't allow those people to travel into Malaysia. And the same holds true, you know, if you're in Thailand and there's another outbreak in Thailand, you know, a new variant pops up and you want to travel to Indonesia, Indonesia could say, you know what, we don't allow you to come in because you represent a high risk to our country. So what's the purpose of living in Asia, you know, as a digital nomad if you don't have the freedom of movement? You know, there's not really much point. I mean, yeah, you can stay in one country, you can build a business, you can live there, but the whole premise, you know, the whole attraction used to be, well, I go to Asia, you know, and I can kind of move around that area very nicely and very effortlessly. But right now, it doesn't seem like this will be possible in the next year or two. and possibly also not in the next 5 years. It's very difficult to predict. It depends on what approach our governments take. However, right now, I think it's a difficult time in Southeast Asia.
That's a great update. Thank you so much for this. Now, the next thing that I wanted to ask you is, which countries have you visited in Asia and have you spent time in? Because I remember from our previous interview that you have spent a good amount of time there. So can you let us know?
Yeah, definitely. I would like to share this info with you, Daisy. Now, my journey in Southeast Asia started in Malaysia. It was back in 2011. I was very excited, just started making the first big money. And I was like, well, I don't really want to live back home. And I was like, where can I live for less money and get more bang for the buck? And I took a look, I had a couple of offers because I met a couple of people. I was working with a company in the US. And then I had a partner living in Malaysia, and we were talking about Malaysia, and he told me how great it was, especially for dating and other things too. It's a very good place. He told me he was living in Malaysia on a tourist visa, and it was just a very convenient way to live life. Very affordable, great food, warm weather throughout the year, very easy to travel around the region from where he lived. And I was kind of really tempted because I felt like, I want to go to the undeveloped world to see what it's like. And getting started in Malaysia was really great for me. I then spent a good amount of time there, but this is not where my journey ended. I really tried a lot of other places. I went to the Philippines. I was in Mactan, a very good place. That was in 2012. I went there for a couple months. I tried it out. I really enjoyed myself there a lot as well. Made a bunch new friends there, people that I'm still in contact with right now. And then, I kind of moved to Vietnam, a place that I thought I'd never live there, because the things that you hear about Vietnam on Western television or, movies or whatever are not necessarily only positive things, right? But I was very open, When I got to Asia, I was very open. I was like, I want to try out different countries. I want to see what living in those countries is like. So after the Philippines, I went to Vietnam. That's also where I met my ex-girlfriend, and we were together for a pretty long time. We built a business together, had a phenomenal time together. We traveled a lot together. I really enjoyed the time in Vietnam a lot too. It was a different experience than living in Malaysia. Made a bunch of new friends in Vietnam as well. And I found it very difficult to leave Vietnam because it was very liberal towards foreigners living in the country. And people there were very respectful. I really enjoyed it a lot. And I've spent a good amount of time in Thailand, a couple of months, many times, Cambodia, Taiwan, Indonesia. I've spent time in all those countries. There's a bunch of other countries too: Japan, China, Hong Kong, Macau, Singapore, Indonesia. I've spent months and months and months in all those countries, and so I have a lot to tell, which definitely could not all be discussed in this video, but I did enjoy my time a lot.
Great, thank you so much. Now, another thing I wanted to ask you is, why do you think that some countries in that particular region are doing better than others?
Yeah, when it comes to the pandemic, certain countries did a lot better than others. And I think the country that probably did the best is Thailand and Singapore. Like Singapore said, you know what, we're closing things down. We're not allowing any tourists to come in until we have vaccinated at least 80% of the population. I think it was 70%, but the numbers don't really matter. But they had a very strict procedure. They put it in place. They stuck to it, and it didn't open up until just recently. And now they're like, hey, you know what? We're allowing people from South Korea, I believe, and Germany to come into the country, provided they're fully vaccinated and they comply with all entry requirements. So Singapore definitely did a great job. Another country that did better than others is Cambodia. Cambodia has also been closed for the most part, now opening up to tourists from South Korea and China, assuming they are vaccinated. Still unclear at what point they will open up to international tourists from all other countries, but I think, yes, Singapore and Cambodia have done pretty well. Thailand has had a little bit of a crazy time because they've been changing their opinion pretty much every other day. One day they would say, you know what, you can come in on October 1st, assuming you're vaccinated, you don't need a quarantine. The next day, a different department within the government would make another statement saying that, you know what, you can only come in if you come from these countries. They have like a list of so and so many countries, and if not, you still need a quarantine, or even worse, you cannot come in at all. Then Vietnam had an even tougher time because they decided to delay the vaccine rollout because they thought, you know what, we can contain this virus, but just shutting things down, not allowing our citizens, our residents and people living there to do anything, and they thought that this approach would be successful, but guess what? It wasn't successful at all. In fact, it only delayed the effects of the pandemic, which was not good. The Philippines had been closed since the pandemic started in spring 2020, hasn't really opened up to international tourists yet. However, there are some positive improvements happening in the Philippines because they are now allowing people like residents and citizens in, assuming they are arriving from countries that the Philippines considers as safe. Then other countries, like Indonesia has taken an interesting approach. Indonesia opened up for a couple months this year, then they closed down again. Now they're opening up again, but again, only to certain countries and only if you are vaccinated and comply with all requirements.
Great, thank you. Now, what do you think the future holds for Southeast Asia in terms of who can visit as well as their visa programs?
This is the million-dollar question that you're asking here, Daisy, because there is a lot of foreigners. I don't know the exact number, but possibly more than 1 million of foreigners that are currently locked out of Southeast Asia that would like to come back in on a tourist visa, but don't know if and when it will be possible again. I don't have all the answers for those people that are currently locked out of the region. However, we take a look at a country like Malaysia. Malaysia has used this time to restructure certain visa programs. Taking a look at the Malaysia My Second Home program, the government has revised the program, increasing the requirements needed to qualify for the Malaysia My Second Home program, and of course in the process upsetting a lot of the current pass holders because current pass holders were asked by the government to comply with the new requirements, even though the government had told them when they got approved for the Malaysia My Second Home visa in the first place that they will not need to comply with any new requirements in the future, that the old requirements would stick no matter what. And you can guess it upsetted a lot of foreigners who obtained this visa, in full faith that, okay, I get this visa, I can stay in Malaysia, and this is my home. It was a 10-year pass, and they have quadrupled many of the requirements, the income requirements, the fixed term deposit requirements. Also, the pass fees have gone up, just a lot of changes that were not for the better for the people that are currently on this pass. And we have seen similar things in Thailand. Thailand just now introduced a new 10-year visa, which is definitely geared towards high net worth individuals, wealthy retirees, because they're asking for $250,000 to $500,000 invested in real estate or bonds. This is not an amount that a lot of people can easily allocate to a residence unless they're millionaires. And we can definitely see a little bit of a capitalistic approach here, where we can see governments moving away from cheaper visa options into really high ticket, high bracket visa options that a lot of people will not be able to afford. We don't know exactly how this will play out. In Thailand, I would say definitely Thailand will be open to international tourists, offering them the 30-day and 60-day tourist visa. It's available again right now. We don't know what kind of visa options Malaysia will have, but we can say almost with certainty that the 90-day tourist visa will be available again to most Westerners. The Philippines, very unclear territory at this point because the government has been shut. Not a lot of updates have been given in terms of who can enter if and when the country reopens. Whenever things normalize, it's a very difficult, unpredictable situation in the Philippines. The Philippines hasn't really announced any new visa programs either, but people have the option for certain retirement programs, residence visas. Bali still has the business visa, so I think people should be good to go there. Vietnam, also very uncertain at this point. But yeah, I do think that certain countries may not offer the same short-term visas that they used to offer, but what they will do in the future is that they will offer high-ticket visa programs for foreigners looking to live in the country, looking to invest. That's what they want. Asian countries want your money, they want your investment, and if you can give them your investment, they will offer you a long-term visa in return.
Great, thank you. And lastly, I wanted to ask you, when will you be returning to Asia?
That is a great question, Daisy, a really great question, and I have a pretty lengthy answer to give, so I want to make it short here. What is really important to me is that travel within the region is possible again without quarantine, without any vaccination proof required, because I have personally decided I'm not taking any more shots myself. Not because I'm scared of the side effects, not because, I'm anti-vaccine, no, nothing like that. It's just a personal choice that I made because I don't want to be controlled by governments. And I think if I say yes this time and then the next time, I will be saying yes every single time just so I'll be able to go to a country. This is not what I want. This is not what I stand for. So for me, it would be important that the government say, you know what, you can come in maybe with just a negative PCR test whenever they're at the point when, let's say 80% of the population is fully vaccinated. They say, you know what, foreigners, come back into Thailand. We welcome you. Come back to our country. You don't need to be vaccinated. You don't need a quarantine. Just get a PCR test before you leave. And we're good with that. If it gets to this point, I'd probably be inclined to visit. There's another contingency. Another contingency is for countries to remove the outdoor mask mandate. Because indoor, I think it's fine in Asia. You have air conditioned, but I don't want to walk around. I don't want to spend time outside in the tropics having to wear a mask all the time. I personally know I wouldn't be happy with that. I have done that in Vietnam. It's not very pleasant. It's hot, it's humid. So not really what I'm looking for. I'd rather be in a place where governments don't require that, or maybe require it but don't care about it as much necessarily. And this would be another big requirement for me, right? That they remove the mask mandates. And yeah, first thing that I said is just, you know what? Travel within Southeast Asia is just the same as it was pre-pandemic. If that should happen, I'd be back in a heartbeat. The thing is, we don't know how things will develop over the next months. It's really difficult to tell. Governments may take different approaches. Some governments may be more involved in wanting to continue these requirements, these mandates, and, really putting more effort towards vaccine passports than others. And those are the countries that I want to avoid, right? But if there are countries that are like, we will remove all of this because our people are vaccinated, we don't fear anything right now, foreigners can come back in, we want investment to come back into the region. If they should decide to do that, I'd be back in a heartbeat too. In case that should not happen this year, next year, in 2023, whatever, if it should not happen, I'd be totally fine not going back to Southeast Asia. I'd find other places to visit, to live in, like Latin America is a great place. It's highly underrated in my personal opinion. Africa, great developments are happening there. Not something, not a place that a lot of people think about, not a place that a lot of people would consider visiting or living in, but so was Asia. Southeast Asia, 2 decades ago, nobody went to Southeast Asia. In fact, when I arrived in Kuching, Malaysia, there was almost no foreigners there. Like my partner and I back then, we were the only foreigners. Not the only foreigners, but one of the few foreigners that lived in that city back in 2011. So I think the fun, the joy, the great times ahead of us will be in places that are open just as if the pandemic never happened. And those are the places that you want to visit.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jerry, for all the insightful information that you've given us today. I really hope that everyone who's been watching got a lot of interesting info and updates from this video. Definitely, guys, subscribe to this channel if you want to be in tune with everything that's been happening in the digital nomad world. And Jerry, I was really happy to do yet another interview with you, and I can't wait for us to do another one in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Daisy. I'm very glad that you were able to do this interview with me today, and I look forward to doing many more interviews with you in the future. Now, if you guys have any questions about this interview, or if you want to share a personal experience of yours living in Southeast Asia during this pandemic, definitely feel free to leave a comment below. And if you want anything discussed in a future interview that Daisy and I will conduct, then definitely let us know as well.
Bye.